All throughout human civilization, different societies and cultures, as well as their philosophers within them, have debated and discussed what makes a person virtuous. People such as Plato deem it that the deeds that you do, as long as you are doing a good deed, you are virtuous by association. Aristotle states that everyone is born with the potential to become ethically virtuous and practically wise, but it is the habits that you form. He explained that to reach and properly be ethically virtuous, you must go through two stages. First, they must develop the proper habits by watching those around them and deciding and choosing which habits they are to follow. If their habits are good habits, that is one of the two things necessary to be ethically virtuous. The other is to have practical wisdom. Practical wisdom is the choice and the knowledge and the wisdom to when to know when to push something and when to pull back on a thing. You cannot be ethically virtuous, in Aristotle's opinion, if you do not have a combination of good habits and this practical wisdom. Without the combination, you can have almost there and you can be virtuous, but you will not be fully ethically virtuous. There is a mean that Aristotle talks about, a golden mean, where there is appropriate times to be outraged and there are appropriate times to not be outraged. You are not meant to always be at a single level where you don't push any boundaries, but you don't just fall over everything. You are not meant to just go with the flow of what society and those around you say. You must think for yourself and decide whether or not and where your response to a situation is practical and when you are going overboard. He states that ethical virtues are based more in a knowledge and intellectual state and less in your emotional response. You should always be thinking about what's going on and choosing your response to it, not based off of what your emotions say, but based off of what your wisdom on the situation says, where your knowledge in the situation is. So, in situations with whistleblowers, that is a very good thing to have because you must decide when it is worth pushing further and when it is not worth pushing further. When the response is overexerted or when that your response is under and you should actually make a larger response. With the case of Chelsea Manning, this is very important, and she is a very good example of someone who is ethically virtuous on the state of Aristotle's opinions on what makes someone ethically virtuous, because she had the wisdom and the knowledge and the habits to push the envelope and say that it was not right for them to do this and for the government to cover up these acts within the military and push it and be outraged at the fact that they were covering them up. So she pushed it and blew the whistle and told the public what was going on. However, she was also, within her habits, knew that society wouldn't let her just get off the hook, even though what she did was necessary. She still had to abide by the rules of society, so she turned herself in afterwards. Versus that of like Edward Snowden, where he also is in a way ethically virtuous. He just is to a lesser degree possibly ethically virtuous according to Aristotle if you were to ask him, because he knew to push and to get the information out there. However, he just kept pushing it and wouldn't relate and knowledge back use his knowledge and his wisdom of society and his role within society to accept some consequences to it. Instead, he's still pushing and keeps pushing further and further in a state of almost constant outrage. Now, while some outrage is good, not being in a constant state of outrage is neither good for society or yourself, because if someone is in a state of constant outrage, it becomes very easy to kind of put them to the side, or they end up hurting themselves in the process, and their statements and their knowledge get lost within it because people will be like, that person's always like that, there is nothing more to add. So while it is important to not just stay in your lane and kind of go with the flow, you have to put your own thought processes into everything and make decisions. You should never be fully committed to one route or another. You must properly, when you come to a situation, think about all the sides and decide intellectually what the proper response to any situation is. Then you input your emotional and what habits you have into a situation, because if you have good habits, you will be more likely to make the correct choice overall.